Thanks for tuning in to the Our Lads Football channel, Our Lads Football Network, as we continue to take a look at the NFL Draft post. That's right. This is finally here. We've talked a lot about pre-NFL Draft content. Well, now we are starting to get going here with post-NFL Draft content. We just did an interview with RJ Ochoa following the Dallas Cowboys. Our second interview here is going to be with Corbin Smith, and Corbin has a new website that he owns all on his own, and that is emeraldcityspectrum.com. Corbin, I really want to thank you for doing this. I know things are pretty crazy for you right now. It's a crazy fun time to be an NFL fan. Regardless, it's a great time, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me as always.
All right, so let's get into this. Well, first of all, usually when I bring in like a new analyst, I want to find out all about him. Well, you have a new channel, so I think this is important. Tell me a little bit about this new channel.
Yeah, it's actually a new website, emeraldcityspectrum.com. We do have a YouTube channel, but most of our full videos are on the website for subscribers. We'll put some teasers up on our YouTube channel, and subscribers can access the entire video. And we think we offer the best value in the Pacific Northwest. $6 a month, 19 cents a day. You get Seahawks, Mariners, Sounders, Storm, Seawolves. I mean, we have every pro and college team covered in Seattle, and we got awesome writers that are covering those teams. We've got 6 credentialed reporters on our staff right now, so you're getting top-of-the-line insider insight from every single one of those teams, and so we're really fired up about the site. We just kicked off in February, so it's early, but you can get any Seahawks and Mariners and Storm, Sounders, any of those teams coverage that you want. And it's 19 cents a day. It is an absolute bargain.
That sounds like it to me. And of course, you do a great job, which is the reason why I love having you back as often as we've had for several years now. And this is an important time. I mean, even though that we didn't get a chance to talk to you before the draft, this is really more important because now we know exactly what's going on as far as which picks, which players are headed to Seattle. And I'll tell you right now, I mean, looking at this draft class, and because of the fact that it's a pretty deep class, I was actually pretty close to considering Seattle as an A class for me. I didn't put them in A, but I was sure pretty close to it. I think the only thing that I was a little bit unsure about was whether or not Gray Zabel should have been an 18th pick. But could be a little bit nitpicking because we here at Our Lads have believed all along that if you go from about 15 in the draft to about 40 of the draft, you can mix those guys anywhere and nobody would be surprised where these guys land. But overall, I mean, there's a ton of real good talent here to talk about.
Yeah, this is a really good draft class. And I know that a lot of Seahawks fans have been kind of going, like, we don't know. These guys haven't been on the field yet. And obviously that's true for all 32 teams. But this is the most athletic draft class that the Seahawks have ever put together. I believe NFL Next Gen Stats, their first 4 picks, the average athleticism grade was a 91. That was the highest for a team since 2003. So Seattle got a bunch of athletes. But they didn't just draft athletes. They drafted athletes that can play football. These are not combine warriors. Gray Zabel is a 99th percentile athlete, but he watched the film at the Senior Bowl. Everybody was wondering, is he going to be able to handle FBS top-tier competition?
Sure.
He had players at Mobile that were just calling him out, wanting to go against him, and he just kept stepping up to the challenge, dominating guys, and that athleticism in this scheme – I don't know that he was worth pick 18 for some teams in the draft, but you got to look at scheme fit. And I think in Clint Kubiak's offense playing for John Benton, who is one of the best zone blocking instructors in the NFL, this just feels like the ideal fit for both sides. And there's a reason they made him the highest drafted guard they've had since Steve Hutchinson. And by the way, Steve Hutchinson is a consultant for this team. He's one of the guys that signed off on this pick. He loves Gray Zabel. So I think for Seattle at 18, this was a really good value for them bringing him in. It might not have been for some other teams, but his skill set fits what the Seahawks want to do, both in the run game and in pass protection.
And that's all that matters. Okay, so let's stick with the offensive line then, because you told me the last time we spoke that the kid from Oregon State, that offensive guard, was really starting to come on a little bit late last year. There's something to like about his upside. Just taking a look at our lads, the way they have their depth charts, do you think that is what the depth chart is right now? Do you think Bradford is ahead of, say, LaMea? Or and again, let's keep in mind, the reason I brought this up now is because they added a couple of later round picks, a couple of tackles who started the entire year, Kansas and Iowa. Looks like they're going to be converted to guard. So they knew there was an issue at guard, which they had. And they made a heavy investment in Zabel. They added a couple of guys late, and they also have the kid LaMea from last year. So tell me about the depth chart right now for the Seahawks up front.
I right now would have Anthony Bradford potentially on the outside looking in for a roster spot, let alone starting, because I don't know that he fits this scheme. He is a totally different player than what Gray Zabel is. He's 330 plus pounds. His game is more predicated on bullying people, knocking them off the ball in a gap scheme. And he's a really good athlete for his size. At least he tested that way, but it doesn't show up a lot of the times on film. He has struggled so much the first 2 seasons, and he was in an offense that I think was better catered for his skill set. So right now I would have Christian Haynes in the starter at right guard. He had a rough rookie season, but this is a better offense for him and what he does well. And for whatever reason, last year, the line coach, Scott Huff, just didn't seem interested in playing him when his film, when he played last year, was decent. And if he could have played more, who knows what happens. But right now, to me, Haynes and LaMea are the top 2 guards at right guard. And Bryce Cabledew, the 6th-round pick out of Kansas, is the sleeper to watch here because he had an even better relative athletic score than Gray Zabel did. And he's been a tackle at the college level. He may be better suited now inside. Cabledew is a guy to keep a close eye on, but I think Christian Haynes is going to start at right guard, and I think Zabel's your starter at left guard. Center, I would be leaning to Oluwatimi, though Jalen Sundell, he played a bunch of games with Gray Zabel at North Dakota State, and he is the better athlete of those 2 players. He might be a better fit in this offense than what Oluwatimi is. So that may end up being a interesting competition there. I would say that Oluwatimi has the edge right now, though.
That's a nice little insight there. I like that. What happens if because Lucas hasn't been able to stay healthy? So what happens if Lucas is once again unable to get out there and play? Do they have an answer right away as a number 2 right tackle?
Well, they're hoping that is not going to be the case. And I can tell you that I've recently seen Abraham Lucas, and the dude is shredded right now. He looks fantastic. This is the first offseason he's had since his rookie year that he's healthy. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of optimism on that front going into the final year of his rookie contract. But as far as backups, they did sign Josh Jones in free agency, who has started quite a few games previously for the Arizona Cardinals and the Houston Texans. He's played some guard too. So he replaced George Fant as their new swing tackle. And Mike Jarrell going into year 2. They drafted him out of Findlay University, Division II school, in 2024, and he actually had to start 4 games for the Seahawks last year. As a 6th-round pick coming from Division II, he had his moments that you could see that he made that jump from Division II to the NFL, but he also had some really nice plays. There were flashes, and he's a really good athlete. Mike Jarrell might be the name to keep an eye on there. I would anticipate if Lucas had any injuries or cross at the left tackle position, that Mike Jarrell's a guy that could play either one of those spots. And D2 guys, typically year 2 is a massive jump for them. Now that he's had an idea what he's going up against. So Mike Jarrell is the player that I would watch closely there.
Okay, let's go ahead and stick on the offensive side first of all, because in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, a couple of guys were added. Let's start first of all with Elijah Arroyo at tight end, because of course everybody's talking deservedly so about Loveland and Warren, and those are the top 2 guys, 1st-round guys. But right after that, boy, Elijah Arroyo really started to jump up on a lot of boards as a clear number 3, the top guy behind those top 2. And so he lands in a good spot. Noah Fant has never really taken that next step to be the guy that everybody thought he was going to be. But that's okay. He's been a solid player. Barner, we know what he's done, both at Michigan, Indiana, and here in his first year was a solid first year as a rookie. But to bring in Arroyo, how big is this going to be for the offense?
This is the biggest boom or bust pick that the Seahawks had in their first 3 rounds, at least in my opinion, because I can see Arroyo absolutely lighting it up in the NFL. I also have concerns about the fact that 2 of the last 3 years at Miami, he's had injuries and he missed the pre-draft process because he was dealing with a sore knee. Like there's some flags there potentially durability wise, but he was playing in an offense that didn't maximize his ability to stretch the field last year at Miami. And he was really the 4th or 5th receiver on that team. We're talking about a 6'5", 254-pound tight end that runs like he weighs 225. He is a fluid athlete. He had 1 drop his entire college career as well. So he's got incredibly reliable hands. Clint Kubiak has a history of using tight ends heavily in the passing game in his offense, being a Shanahan-oriented scheme. So this sets up favorably for him to get a lot of snaps early. I could see him push Noah Fant for snaps, but the key is going to be being healthy. That's why, to me, this was a little bit of a boom or bust selection. But John Schneider said if he would have been healthy those 2 years he was banged up, they probably wouldn't have had a shot to get him at 50. He said he might have been a top 15 player in this draft class. That's how highly the Seahawks view him. And he's got the tools to understand why you'd evaluate him that way. So if it hits, this could end up being a steal, even at pick 50. If it doesn't work out and he continues to battle injuries, people are going to look back and say, man, there were some really good players at other positions that they may have had a chance to draft there that they ended up passing on for Arroyo.
Okay. Before we move out of tight end, I just have to bring up one of the signings, one of the free agent signings after the draft on this side of the ball, first of all, because it looks like Seattle signed 7 college free agents on offense. And the one that sticks out for me is actually Nick Kellera, because of the fact that he's just a beast of a blocker. And I think he's got a chance to make an NFL roster. I don't know about this year, but this dude is almost like having another right tackle on the team. That's how much of a blocker he is at the tight end position. Is there one guy, as far as these college free agents on offense, that you think is the player to keep an eye on?
I would actually go to a different position of the offensive line, and it would be Federico Moranguez out of Florida Atlantic. And the big reason why Seattle didn't add any centers, and Moranguez is pretty athletic, so he fits with this zone blocking scheme. He was a top 20 ranked zone blocking center in the country, according to Pro Football Focus last year. So I still think he's got a long shot. I think the fact they drafted 9 offensive players out of their 11 picks, it's going to be really hard for any of these undrafted offensive guys to make the team as a result. But Moranguez is the one that I would keep a close eye on, just because of the center position being somewhat wide open, with him now being the number 3 center coming into Seattle.
Okay, let's talk about Milroe. This was interesting. You know, the first thing you think about is, well, wait a second. They just signed Sam Darnold. He's young. He's in his prime. I thought they signed him because they believed in him. Why are they bringing in a young guy for that is looking to start in the NFL? But once you think about that, and then there's the other thing is I was a 3rd round draft pick. That's a premium spot to add either on offense or defense. But on the flip side, it makes a lot of sense because you add in another talented quarterback. And I love the idea of drafting quarterbacks every year. I think you should do that as often as you can, especially in the NFL. And we don't know yet about Sam Darnold, to be frank. We don't. I mean, he had a great year in Minnesota. Things tailed off at the end and in the postseason. And we really don't know outside of Minnesota if he can play with another team yet. So why not go ahead and take a kid at that spot that has some talent and early on in the process could have been a late 1st round draft pick. So now that I've said my piece, how did Seattle fans take to it?
You know, this was kind of a mixed bag from Seahawks fans, but I think that a lot of them that were against it initially are kind of warming up to it because, listen, I don't know that Seattle would have gone down this road if they only had like 6 or 7 draft picks, but they ended up making 11 selections in this draft, and they had a lot of picks in day 3. They felt like they could still cover a lot of their needs while getting a player who has an incredibly high ceiling. I don't think there's a quarterback in this draft class that has a higher ceiling than Jalen Milroe does. Now, potential can be a very dangerous word because, as we all know, a lot of guys don't reach their potential in the NFL. And there's a lot of things to be spooked by when you watch Jalen Milroe on film. The lack of pocket presence a lot of the time the short to intermediate accuracy. I mean, he's been below 60% accuracy the last 2 years at Alabama on throws 11 to 20 yards. So he has got to get much better in that regard. His fundamentals, his mechanics get away from him on short to intermediate throws. But then the deep ball, I don't know that you'll find a guy that's got a better set of mechanics throwing the ball downfield than what Jalen Milroe does. He's got 4.39 speed, which is something you rarely are going to see at the quarterback position. And I think you can justify, John Schneider's typically only had 2 quarterbacks on the roster pretty much the entire time he's been in Seattle. Jalen Milroe, though, is a weapon because of his speed and his running ability that justifies keeping a third quarterback on the roster. And listen, if you develop some of those areas that are deficiencies in his game, and he's a great kid, so he's going to put the work in. If that work and coaching turns into him becoming a much more polished passer and a better understanding of pocket presence and reading his progressions over the next few years, look, this is the guy, if he hits, has all pro type skills. I mean, you can't teach 4.39 speed and the arm power, the downfield proficiency that he's got. You can't teach those traits. If you can get those other areas shored up, John Schneider right now, this is one heck of a lottery ticket that he's playing in the 3rd round. I had a 4th round grade. Pick 92 is about as high as I would have gone picking him. So to me, it made a lot of sense with having all the picks they had later to take a flyer on a guy that if he hits, maybe Sam Darnold plays well, but if Jalen Milroe gives you some elements that Darnold can't, like the speed and running ability, who knows what they're going to do a couple years down the road with it.
Yeah, and worst case scenario, if all it works out enough, which I think it should, then maybe by 2026, he's the number 2 quarterback. And he's a guy that you can turn to if there's an injury and Darnold plays well and so forth and so on. And then you go back to the 2 quarterback system. Do you think the team really has faith that if something were to happen to Darnold, I know it's early, we'll talk about this in camp, but do you think that they're okay with the possibility of, hey, if we need a big start or 2 from Drew Lock, we can get that?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, look at the Eagles game on Monday Night Football 2 years ago. Geno Smith was banged up. Drew Lock gets a start, throws a game-winning touchdown to Jackson Smith and Jigba. You just saw a different confidence in Drew Lock, and there's a reason he wanted to come back this offseason. He felt like he played his best football in Seattle. The Seahawks have confidence in him. That's why they signed him and then said, we're going to draft a QB2. Bye-bye, Sam Howell. So they made that move to bring Drew Lock in. I would be curious, though, if that happened later in the season, if Seattle decided, you know what, Jalen Milroe with that 4.39 speed for a start or 2, we could do some really fun stuff with him for a couple games that Drew Lock can't provide. So I'm wondering if that would be an interesting conversation behind closed doors. But that's getting the horse behind the wagon here, so to speak. Lock right now would clearly be the number 2 guy with his experience and the fact that he has won games quarterbacking the Seahawks.
Okay, so before we go to wide receiver, the team added a converted tight end to play fullback. Is that the case we're going to see here?
Robbie Oots, there it is. I love this kid, and I am a football purist, Greg. I think that the fullback should be a part of every NFL offense. I understand that the spread has changed things, but especially now, all these teams are putting 225, 230-pound linebackers on the field. I'm getting a 275-pound masher as a lead blocker and saying, go hit that guy. And I think you're already seeing this start to come back, the run game being more important the last couple years.
Sure.
And Robbie Oots has not played fullback really, but you watch the tight end tape and he gets after it. And he had really good agility testing scores for a 274-pound guy. He really meshes well with what Seattle's going to want to do with this offense. And I think Mike McDonald from his time in Baltimore is thinking, hey, this is our Pat Ricard. Let's add him to our offense. And Clint Kubiak uses fullbacks a lot. So I expect Oots, as long as he beats out Brady Russell, which that's not a given, Brady Russell moving to fullback could be a more athletic, intriguing option. But I'm very excited to see what Robbie Oots can do as that masher, who, by the way, had 2 touchdown catches last year. So he's not just a blocker. There is some pass catching ability on short passes from this guy. And who wants to tackle a 274-pounder that has some athleticism and has pretty soft hands out of the backfield? He's the guy that a lot of fans were kind of saying, why do you take him in the 5th round? But if this guy comes in and plays well for you in this offense, that can be 5th-round value because fullbacks are prioritized a lot more in the Shanahan scheme.
Well, all of this is really telling us something pretty simple, and that is that they have every intention of getting more physical up front, running the football more.
Yep.
And that's a sight for sore eyes, I think, for any fan outside of the fans who just can't get enough of the passing game. But like you said, as we saw last year with the Eagles, and I don't think this is going to be the end of it. I think it's the rebirth of the running game. I think that's great for the sport, and this makes a lot of sense. And again, even just from me pointing out that the Nick Callerup signing is exactly what they're trying to do. They want to be big and physical, and they're trying to get as many of these guys as possible, even a kid that they just signed after the draft. So yeah, I got to believe fans in Seattle are pretty happy about that, especially when you got a guy that's talented as Kenneth Walker in the backfield.
Yeah, and Zach Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh. They drafted Damian Martinez out of Florida, who's never had less than 6 yards a carry in a season in his college career. I mean, they've got a stacked running back group, but they haven't been able to take advantage of it because the blocking's been poor. But you hope the offensive line is going to be better. And now you've got this 274-pound road grader in front. Yeah, they're going to get back to playing physical downhill football. And that's a big reason Ryan Grubb was one and done as the offensive coordinator. Mike McDonald got very frustrated at the end of the year about the lack of a running game. And a lot of it was just neglecting it and deciding, well, we're going to wing it all over the house. And that ultimately cost them a game or two last year that could have got them into the postseason. So Clint Kubiak is not going to let that happen. Clint Kubiak's going to come in and run the football. And that is in his blood. It's in his DNA. He learned it from his father. He's learned it from the Shanahans. They're going to get back to running the football and take advantage of that wealth of talent they have in the backfield.
That's going to help my dynasty team because I have both Walker and also I have Breece Hall. And I was just as frustrated with what happened with Breece Hall in the running game last year. And the Jets are doing the same thing Seattle is. They want to run the football. So I'm all ears, and that, makes me real happy. But I think it's just great to see for the team in Seattle because Kenneth Walker's too explosive and fun as a football player. We're just not getting to see the best of him. So I hope this is the start of it this season. You mentioned Martinez. So he's going to battle for some additional playing time there at some point. And McIntosh and Martinez they're different running backs, so the different skill sets. So it's pretty easy to see that when the final cut down comes in a few months, that those are going to be the top 4 running backs. We're going to see McIntosh and Martinez as the top backups, correct? Behind Charbonnet?
Yeah, I would think they're going to keep all 4 of those guys as long as every one of them's healthy. I just think with where they're going, it's going to be more 2 back and 2 tight end or 3 tight end sets, less receivers on the field. I think you're going to see that emphasizing how the depth chart plays out in the 53-man roster, especially with holding extra running backs, having a fullback, a dedicated fullback on the roster. Yep. It's going to be a lot different. I can tell you Seahawks fans, the majority of them for like the last 10 years have been begging for a fullback. And they're finally going to go back that direction. When they had Mike Robinson on their Super Bowl teams, the fullback to me is just a position. It's gotten phased out by so many teams, but there's value to having guys that are legitimate fullbacks, not moving tight ends or linemen or whatever, having legitimate fullbacks. I think there's major value to that, especially in the NFL.
Especially because some of the things that it's rare to get one of them, but if you can get a hold of one of those fullbacks that can block and catch, then you've got something. All right. So before we go over to the defensive side, you got Ricky White and Torrey Horton. And, these are a couple of the top mid-major level receivers that had to deal with some adversity coming into the draft. You had Ricky White dealing with his 40 time at the combine, and he much better at his pro day, but you cannot deny his production at UNLV the last few years. And Torrey Horton, I mean, if that kid did not get injured, I could see him easily being a 3rd-round draft pick. Who knows? It could have even been any higher. I mean, that kid is an explosive receiver. The injury was devastating, but I find it interesting that, when we were looking at some deep sleepers, value guys in the draft to keep an eye on, especially from the mid-major level, these 2 guys were really at the top of the class.
Yeah, I had a 4th-round grade on Ricky White the third and a 3rd-round grade on Torrey Horton going into this draft. And Horton told us in his conference call that he ran in the mid 4.3s a couple weeks before the combine. So he's back running the way that he's capable of. He has legitimate 4.3 speed.
Yep.
And we saw him against Travis Hunter a couple years ago have a big game against Colorado. And not many guys could say that going against the number 2 pick for the Jaguars. And so Torrey Horton has done this against really good players in the past. And Mountain West, it's just such an underrated conference. There's a lot of really good NFL players that come out of that conference. And Torrey Horton, you said it. If he wouldn't have had that injury, Seattle ain't getting him at pick 166. He's gone on day 2. And the opportunity to get him there is a really good value. And yet I would argue of all of Seattle's picks, I don't know that there was a better value pick than Ricky White III. Again, I had a 4th-round pick on him. I don't care what he ran at the combine. I saw what he ran at the pro day. That's more what I see on film from Ricky White III. He's a smooth route runner. And here's the thing that's underrated about his game. You turn on UNLV film, he is absolutely a menace as a run blocker. For being a smaller receiver, he gets after it. You can tell that he cares about it. This guy's just a football player. He had 4 blocked punts last season for UNLV. So, and he's never returned punts. Well, let's just try it. 3rd time he returns one, he returns it to the house for a touchdown. Like, he is just a football player. He is tough. He is hard-nosed. He will do whatever it takes to help his football team out. And I think he's the biggest reason UNLV went from being one of the worst programs in college football to being in the top 25 most of last year. That team followed his lead. And so he brings that leadership. He's got the toughness mentally that you're looking for. I just think he's a really good pick at 238. I wouldn't have batted an eye if they would have taken him in the 4th round, because I think he's that kind of a player. So both these guys, that receiving core looks much better now after all the defections they had with those 2 coming in. I expect that they're going to get early run on offense and special teams.
You know, and they're also, as long as they're healthy, especially Horton, and no setbacks, they're going to get a chance, I think. Look, Cooper Kupp has not been able to stay healthy for a few years. And Valdez-Scantling, to me, he's just a body. That's all he is. He's just waiting for someone to take his spot. And so if Horton and Ricky White, if one of them perform really well in preseason, the camp, I could see one of them getting some considerable snaps this season. So I think it's going to be exciting to keep an eye on those guys. So if you're dynasty rookie drafting 5th and 7th round receivers, keep an eye on those 2 guys because I think both of them have a shot. Okay, a lot of the draft went on offense, but there were 2 picks here on defense. And let's start with one of my favorites. And ever since I put the tape on him a few months back, I fell in love with Nick Amenmori. How can you not? He's the prototypical hybrid that, like Hamilton from Baltimore, they're not easy to find. But if you find them, you've got something special. And hey, what a surprise. Baltimore has one. So do the Seahawks.
This was a perfect fit for Mike McDonald. And I actually had a couple of mocks I did. I do like 4 or 5 mock drafts during the pre-draft phase. I have them, one after the Senior Bowl, one after the Combine, one after free agency, and then I have one that I post right before the draft. And Amenmori was my pick on 2 of those 4 at pick number 18 for Seattle, just because I thought Mike McDonald's going to be pounding the table like, I want that guy. Even if he has Julian Love and Kobe Bryant already in the roster, he loves playing 3 safeties at the same time. And Nick Amenmori can be a linebacker type for you. You can put him up there as a money linebacker. And I don't think he's some people have mentioned Cam Chancellor comparisons. He played for the same coach in Torian Gray as his DB coach, but they're different players. I don't see Amenmori being the enforcer at the level that Cam Chancellor was. He's not going to come up and knock tackles on their duff and do stuff like that Chancellor did. But he is such a phenomenal athlete, and his ball skills, you can tell he played cornerback previously, because 4 picks last year, 2 of them he returned to the house with his 4.3 speed, 43-inch vertical, incredibly explosive. I think they're going to get him involved early as a big nickel And he's got the athleticism to be able to defend speedy receivers and any of the tight ends because he can match up with them size-wise too. It's just so hard to find guys like that. I was stunned that he did not get picked in the first round.
I know.
And I think John Schneider felt the same way. He told us that they were thinking about trading back into the first round to get him the night before, and they ended up deciding against it. They lucked out, and Emanwari was available at pick 35. You could just tell at the end of the draft on the first round that John Schneider, he had an itchy trigger finger. Like, he wanted to go get Nick Emanwari, and so that's what he ended up doing on day 2. And I can't think of a safety that's a better fit for Mike McDonald's defense with how he plays the game and his mindset.
And then in the 5th round, Riley Mills, a really solid player. I mean, just take a look at what Notre Dame did last year. It was amazing how Notre Dame was able to make it all the way to the championship game and make it a tough game. And they didn't have key guys. Morrison, of course, went down. Several other players on defense went down, including Mills after the first playoff game. And he was a big part of their pass rush last year. I think Mills is a player, no doubt about it. This is a long-time NFL player. And to get him in the 5th round, that was a nice deal.
Yeah, this was one of their bigger bargains. I would say I think Emanwari is right behind Ricky White because, again, I think at pick 18, nobody would have batted an eye if the Seahawks took Emanwari there to get him at 35.
If they would have switched.
Is excellent value. Yeah, John Schneider told us that those two were equal grades, Gray Zabel and Nick Emanwari. So to get both of them is a big win for the Seahawks. And Ricky White, as I said, in terms of value, I think might be the biggest value they had. But Riley Mills is right there in that mix because you're talking about a player that had 7.5 sacks last year. He plays with a high motor, snap after snap. He loves the game. We could tell that talking to him on the phone, like how excited he was. I mean, the Seahawks were the only team that gave him a 30 visit, which kind of surprised. I thought there would be multiple teams like, hey, we'd like to get another medical recheck. The Seahawks were the only one that did. And so they made it very clear to Mills, like, hey, we like you, kid. We want you. He was so excited the Seahawks were the team that picked him because of the interest that they showed. And look, John Schneider wasn't quite as optimistic, but Riley Mills was saying he thinks he can be doing football activities before training camp. Okay. He's way ahead of schedule coming back from that ACL tear. He's already running. 8-month recoveries are not crazy anymore for torn ACLs. It used to be, but there's a chance Riley Mills could be back before or early in the season. And if he ends up coming in with the D-line they already have in place and he comes in and contributes as a rookie, that is a chance to be one of the strongest defensive lines in the NFL. And this kid have a very bright future that he can get out to a quicker start than I think a lot of teams anticipated with how late he suffered that injury.
And before we wrap up, same thing on defense as far as the signings and a whole bunch of players that they signed on defense, even more than offense. But there is really some good talent here. I mean, you take a look at Jared Ivey, also Jackson Woodard. Jackson Woodard's making the team. He's going to make the team somehow. He's too talented. Seth Coleman, I like at Illinois. I like his size and all that. I think he's a really good player to keep an eye on. And even Zy Alexander, all of those guys, in my mind, could have been drafted. And then a whole bunch of other guys they added as well. So who stuck out for you as far as some of their signings on defense?
Well, Jared Ivey easily comes in at number 1. And look, I know he didn't have a good pro day workout. It was extremely underwhelming. But this is a guy that I thought was going to be gone at some point in the middle of day 3. I had him at 153 on my big board because when you turn on the film, this is an all SEC player. He was not doing damage against, inferior competition. He was playing great football against the best of the best. And he's 6'6", 274 pounds. He plays with bricks for hands. And I think that's one of the reasons that he can offset his athleticism. The guy it's bone jarring when he connects with you. He knocks offensive linemen off the line of scrimmage. And he's kind of slithery, even though it doesn't show up in the testing. He just has these slithery ways of sneaking into the backfield. He's got great production. I think Jared Ivey has a 95% chance of making this football team. I think this is a great fit for him, especially if Riley Mills isn't ready for the start of the season. You can plug him in as that hybrid 3-tech, 5-tech. I could see them weighing him around 285, and he can pack that weight on real quick with that 6'6" frame. I could see him being a hybrid guy that fits into Mike Macdonald's defense. And this is maybe going to surprise you because you mentioned Zy Alexander, but I want to mention another corner. Seattle did not draft a corner in this draft. Isaac Waxter from Villanova.
Okay.
Coming from the FCS level, he's 6'2", 210 pounds. This is a big corner that I think has a lot of the skills Mike Macdonald's looking for. He's tough. He's battled adversity, came back from a torn ACL a few years ago and had the best season of his college career. And a lot of FCS teams just stopped throwing at him. So I think you are looking at a player who could potentially be a deep sleeper there. They didn't draft a corner. They lost a few in free agency. He's got size. He likes to come up and hit people. There might be some safety versatility to him there. He can play special teams. I actually have Isaac Waxter higher on my big board than I had Zy Alexander. I can see both these players potentially making the team, but Alexander's had some issues with giving up big plays over the years. Waxter, you didn't see that. I know the competition was it was far inferior, but Waxter to me is a guy that is a really good player. Woodard, I think, is making this roster. I have him on my my first 53 that I just released yesterday. Woodard's a really good player. I was shocked he was not drafted. I had a draftable grade on him. Another guy that helped change UNLV's program, a program culture changer that I really like. And one other sleeper for you. Offense, I couldn't think of any, but this is what happens when you only draft 2 defensive players. It's a lot more appealing for defensive free agents to want to sign with the Seahawks. And that name is J.R. Singleton from Iowa State. I think Iowa State is one of the best programs at taking mid-level recruits and developing them into NFL players. There's so many guys that got picked from Iowa State in the draft, and Singleton tested pretty well in terms of agility and explosiveness and had really good production at Iowa State, and he's played some nose tackle. Seattle could use some help there depth-wise at nose tackle, so keep an eye on J.R. Singleton. That is my real deep wild card sleeper here from this group.
I like it. And I know they didn't really necessarily do anything on special teams, but obviously any of these later round picks, mid to later signings, they're all going to be playing.
Orton and White were great special teams players, though. You just upgraded your special teams with those two guys.
Yeah. So I look at this, and again, we're going to talk more once we get closer to camp and the season. But, just looking at this roster overall, I think Seattle's got the roster now. And again, it all depends on being healthy. That is such an important deal that it's really going to be up to the quarterback. I think they've got a talented roster on offense and on defense. And they're all now going to depend on how far can Sam Darnold take in my mind.
Yep. To me, it's the quarterback position. And I still, it's going to be interesting to see if the Geno Smith move, how that ends up playing out for the Seahawks, because I have been a strong advocate that Geno Smith has been underrated by fans the last couple of years. And he has had such poor line play in front of him. And yet he's been productive. I know he threw some really bad picks in the red zone last year, but some of that was Ryan Grubb. Their red zone play calling was terrible. The spacing for receivers was terrible. So I was initially really looking forward to seeing him run Clint Kubiak's offense, but the Seahawks just didn't want to go to a certain price point. And I think Pete Carroll being in Vegas, as soon as that happened, I think Geno Smith was thinking, I got to go play for my boy Pete Carroll, because Pete Carroll is the one that gave him that second chance to be a starter. So I think in the end, this is what Geno Smith wanted. I think he wanted to go to Vegas. Seattle was confident in Sam Darnold. So now we'll see how this plays out, because if Geno goes to Vegas and absolutely balls out and Darnold regresses, there's going to be a lot of people saying that was a horrible move. We'll see what ends up happening down the line. Typically, John Schneider's made good decisions at quarterback. So if Sam Darnold gets the protection and they have the run game to support him, then this team, I don't see any reason why they can't get to 11 or 12 wins this upcoming year.
How did the fans react to Geno? For most of them, how did they, with Geno and also with Darnold?
That was truly a 50-50. I think, and you really didn't have a mid-ground. You had a large contingency in the fan base that were tired of Geno's interceptions. They felt like there was a ceiling. They'd already reached it. We're not going to get any higher with this guy. And then you had the other 50% where I would say I would fall in line with those 50% where I felt like I think he did incredible with the circumstances that he had around him. And I would have just loved to see one season with him playing with an average offensive line. And the 1 year he had a little bit of a running game. They pushed the 49ers in the wild card round until things unraveled in the fourth quarter. They were winning at halftime in that game. So if they just could have gotten a little bit more of a running game, you know, that's my question, is what would it have looked like? We're not going to ever know at this point. And so it really boils down to, is Sam Darnold going to be able to play as well or better with what I think is a better supporting cast overall now that is around him in Seattle?
And the fans are mostly optimistic about Darnold?
I'd say that it mostly is. I think there's still some fans, especially the ones that were pro Geno. I think there's some fans that are concerned, like, hey, he had one really good year and he played for Kevin O'Connell. Is he going to be able to do that without Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota? So that's where the skepticism comes from. And my viewpoint is, you know, I don't think he has to be quite as good as he was last year. If the Seahawks can run the football the way that I think they're going to be able to, they're not going to have to lean as much on him. If it gets to a point where he has to shoulder the load, I worry that you're going to see some regression back to some of the things we saw earlier in his career. So to me, the run game and getting that offensive line going, those are going to be the keys to where the Seahawks team goes. I think this is a top 5 defense that they've got in Seattle. The offense has weapons, even after trading DK Metcalf, moving on from Tyler Lockett. They've got weapons. I believe in Clint Kubiak. I saw what he did until the injuries hit in New Orleans last year, and then everything unraveled. I saw what he did when that team was healthy, though. I think Seattle has the pieces to be the best team in the NFC West. But you can't get in a position where the offensive line is so bad that Sam Darnold is getting hit all the time and he's got no running game, because then it could end up being a situation where things fall apart.
EmeraldCitySpectrum.com. We'll have a link in the description of this video. You can check that out, as well as you have the same Twitter account, correct, Corbin?
Yep, Corbin Smith NFL.
Okay, we'll have that in the description of this video as well. And we look forward to talking to Corbin for sure at some point right around training camp, and definitely going to get a season preview from Corbin on the Seattle Seahawks. So hopefully by then things are really cooking with your new website, Corbin. And we really appreciate you taking your time to talk to us today.
I hope so. And thank you so much, Greg, as always.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like what you see, and we'll see you next time.